This is the Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition. Good evening, all. I'm Megan Shepard. Thank you so much for joining us. Topping news, the poverty rate in this country a major concern as the national statistics released this week reveal that poverty is reported to be highest in the Family Islands. Tonight, a leading human rights activist is not only weighing in on this troubling revelation, but is offering a solution. Joan Davis-Roll reports.
I'm going to say here right now that no one in this country should be making less than $350 a week.
That is what human rights activist Joseph Dowell says is the minimum salary persons would need to survive. This is many attempt to wrap their minds around the latest startling statistics, which reveal that some 40,000 persons in the country live under the poverty line on less than $5,000 a year.
We are now 14 years into the third millennium, and yet we can have statistics which reveal that out of a population of under 400,000 persons, we have 43,000 of those souls living not at poverty level, but sub-poverty level. This is extremely critical.
Critical because the poor, he says, is getting poorer while the rich get richer.
And I've been told this guaranteed by a former governor of the central bank. He said to me, Joe Dowell, he said there are over $3 billion Bahamian dollars sitting in Bahamian banks at that moment. And he told me this some 4 or 5 years ago. And he said there's no way for the country to get at it. And it just sits there. The only thing that happens is it keeps gaining more and more interest. And so he said, and I said to him, I totally agree, that somehow we have to get at those riches. We have to let them free up some of that money to circulate in the economy to support the people. And you know something? It isn't that those individuals who have all of that money have worked so hard for it. They have gained it on the backs of poor people who have worked day and night to make them rich. And now those same people who work so desperately, so hard, they are now in poverty.
According to the Department of Statistics 2013 household expenditure, based on socioeconomic and demographic information collected from households throughout the country, women represent 52% of all poor persons and have a lower poverty rate than that of men. This, Dowell says, has led to social degradation.
Many mothers have to prostitute themselves in order to survive. They have to have relationships with 5, 6, up to 7 men just to be able to get enough money to survive, to feed their children. Young girls are now prostituting themselves. Many of them can't even afford to buy uniforms unless they have a boyfriend much older than them who's been out of school for a long time and who's probably trading drugs. And they have relationships with them, and that's the only way they can afford the basic items to go to school. This is something that should not be tolerated in a so-called Christian religious community.
But this former principle is not only pointing out the problems, but offering the solution.
What I would suppose, or suggest, is that an individual pay simply 5% tax on that. Right now, they pay like 8 something, or more than 8 on the cutoff point in national insurance. Then I have it prorated, going all the way up to $100,000 a year, keeping in mind that many people in this country make way over $100,000 a year. Some people make $1 million a year. Some people make $500,000 a year. And then it is prorated by the different levels. If you go up to $25,000, you go up to $30,000, $50,000, $75,000, and I marked it off at $100,000. And on $100,000, you pay 20% in income tax.
Joan Davis-Roll, ZNS Network News.
Now, while more and more Bahamians continue to fall below the poverty line, a local talk show host is once again calling on the government to explore the natural resources found here in the Bahamas. Sabrina Brown reports.
We are fighting for sharks. We are fighting for turtles. We are fighting for the environment when we should fight for this country.
Founder of Enough Movement, Kendall Colebrook, is calling on Bahamians to take a stand now for their future. He says he's troubled by the level of poverty and suffering that many Bahamians are facing when he says the Bahamas is rich in natural resources.
I want my government to understand that since the 70s, Sir Lyndon spoke about this aragonite in his white paper in 1972. In 1972, he said this is the financial freedom for the Bahamians. Right here, before me.
He says for far too long, the Bahamas has been the catalyst for other countries to get wealth. He says the time has come for Bahamians to benefit.
Minerals is what the world needs. Our aragonite can actually stop global warming. America needs our aragonite just for their farming alone. They don't have a farm system. So the reason why I'm saying this to the government is we don't need VAT. We need the money from our natural resources.
The radio talk show host says his stance has nothing to do with politics, but rather the Bahamian people. He's calling on the government to take a serious look at developing the many natural resources and establish a sovereign wealth fund.
Sovereign wealth fund. A sovereign wealth fund is where this needs to go into, that every Bahamian gets their share. Every island in the Bahamas, every citizen in the Bahamas gets their share of this through the Sovereign Wealth Fund. So if you're out there, if you're down in Barron Point, if you're down in Mayaguana, you're down in Inagua, we are fighting for you here in Grand Bahama. That's what this is all about.
According to Colebrook, crushed conch shell from the Bahamas is being exported and used as a form of aragonite. Using vinegar, he showed the value of this substance.
Look at what happens to it. That's a living mineral. That's what the Chinese want. That's what everybody else wants.
And get this, Colebrook claims that the sand on our beaches is also a form of aragonite. Sabrina Brown, ZNS Network News.
We spoke with a local environmentalist who confirms that vinegar is used when testing for calcium carbonate, which is a form of aragonite, and that bubbles should appear when an aragonite is detected. But in this case, he questions what this form of aragonite would be used for and what kind of return could be gained from this form of aragonite. He says he believes the greatest return can be made on exports for beach renourishment in places like Florida. But he says any such approval would have to be granted by the government. On the other hand, he believes the crushed conch shells would be of greater economic value. He says it is a form of calcium carbonate, but contends that labor cost and the true value of the product will have to be determined at the outset, and this would be achieved through a feasibility study. The government moving ahead with its plan to regulate the multi-million-dollar web shop business. This following a hailstorm of criticism coming from the church. Tonight, we hear from a key player in what some call one of the fastest-growing industries in the country. John Davis-Rowe reports.
His net worth is in the millions, and his investments spread nationwide and throughout the region. Gaming tycoon and Bahamian entrepreneur Craig Flowers, while on Grand Bahama, said this island's economy is ripe for future growth and development, and the possibilities are endless. But
I think that the port is still holding firm to its belief that the value is still in Grand Bahama, and in my personal opinion, I think there need to be some slack given from both parties to attract investors here, so that they would be able to feel comfortable in putting some new monies into Grand Bahama. It seems almost impossible for Grand Bahama to survive in the present state in which it finds itself.
Despite a referendum held January 28, 2013, when the Bahamian people voted no to regulating and taxing the web shop business, come next month, July 1st, history will be made as the government is expected to take steps to regularize and license the web shop industry. Flowers weighed in on this controversial issue, commending the government for taking such a bold step.
I think that they're moving quite quickly. There's enormous amount of efforts being put behind it. A lot of people are working. I'm not privy to any information at the present time as it relates to whether they're in front, behind, or on par with it. But I do know that there's been an enormous amount of work by the government, and I feel as though, again, that they're doing a great job in getting there. We just have to get there.
The president of FML Group of Companies says this move by the government will not only deepen the economy, but also change the economic landscape of the country.
Well, it's not so much the stake for myself or my company personally. It is for the funds to be reinvested through the normal process, through the normal financial institutions here, that other people may benefit from it. We've been sort of isolated and pushed aside and have a few dollars in our pockets, and we're not being allowed to involve the monies back into the areas in which it should be going into. I personally feel as though that once this hurdle in front of us as far as it relates to regulations is passed, I think we're going to see a lot of good things happening from the industry. The government will be able to do some things, and certainly the local people that are involved in it, they too will find themselves becoming more entrenched in doing more things and freeing up and allowing some revenue to flow back where it should. I'm concerned about that.
Joan Davis-Roll, ZNS Network News.
Meantime, the Minister of Agriculture believes an opportunity exists for Bahamians to invest in the production of limes. Shashina Roll has more.
If you visited the local grocer's market recently, you would know that the price of limes have gone up tremendously. Minister responsible for Agriculture V. Alfred Gray says here at home, limes are a specialty for Bahamian cooks, and this shortage is a major problem.
Limes seem to be a specialty for Bahamian cooks because it seemed to be one of the ingredients that must go into fish, particularly seafood, let me put it that way. And without limes, it just don't taste the same. And so when the shortage came about 3-4 weeks ago, that was a shocker for a lot of cooks, because they thought it would always be available.
Gray says 2 tons of limes are used every month throughout the Bahamas, from hotels to local chefs and for personal use. But he says the truth of the matter is no Bahamian farmer produces limes on a large scale.
When we didn't have any being produced in the Bahamas, we were faced with none coming in by way of import, and whatever did come in, the price tripled. So 2 limes, generally without water, was costing almost $1.50, which was 75 cents per lime. And I have now gone on record as encouraging farmers to go farm for lime, because there's nobody that's doing it. We import it, and we don't have to import it. If somebody will take up the challenge and farm for acres of limes.
The severe shortage of limes has caused prices to skyrocket in the United States, and the blame is pointed at Mexico, the main U.S. supplier of limes. According to reports, there are a combination of factors that have pushed up the price of Persian and key limes, from bad weather to Mexican gangs hijacking trucks and extorting money from those who grow limes. Minister Gray is giving the challenge to farmers.
I have now gone on record as encouraging farmers to go farm for lime, because there's nobody that's doing it. We import it, and we don't have to import it. If somebody will take up the challenge and farm for acres of limes, so that this shortage which occurred a few weeks ago will never happen again. But it has to be locally produced in order for us to avoid shortages.
Stay with us. The Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition continues right after this.